Okay, now I'll just mention right at the outset that many of the points I'm making can also be found under this guide, How to Submit Electronic Thesis Dissertation. That is also a PowerPoint-based walkthrough of this process, but I'm going to hit upon some details that are not mentioned there. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is that the website you go to is www.etdadmin.com/NCAT, and it's going to look just like this. This first page is where you're going to start the submission process. So if you were doing this for the first time, you would click Submit My Thesis, My Dissertation or Thesis. If you click on that form, it's going to bring up a dialog in order for you to create an account. Since I already have an account, I'm not going to show you that, but it asks for your name, email, contact information, etc. So you can create an account with UMI ProQuest. I'll also mention that on this first page, you will find these resources and guidelines. This is a particularly useful set of guides that can guide you through some of the key decisions you'll have to make, and I'll come back to that as we go forward. Now, once you click on Submit My Dissertation Thesis and you create your account, you'll come up with something like this. Again, I have a submission in process for a sample, but you would click Submit a New Dissertation Thesis. When you click on New Submission or Continue Submission, you're going to come up with this page, and this is the key. So on the left-hand column, you have these various sections, and as you complete them, they'll be checked off. And before you get to the final point, which is Submit, you will have to check off each of these various points. The first page is worth reading. It kind of prepares you for this. You need to have the following items before you begin. You need to certainly have the full text of the document in a PDF format. You also need to make sure you have easy access to the abstract alone, because you're going to put it directly into a box, as I'll show you. This is not applicable to most students, but if you have additional files of some kind, you should have those ready as well. You will need to have your advisors and committee members' names handy. And you should look through the subject categories. There's a huge subject category list, and you can kind of use that to narrow down and pinpoint your specific subject. And again, you'll see how that works. Notice that you can save the data as you complete each of these steps. So if you come back at a later time, your account should still maintain your original information. Okay, now the first two sections you're going to have to fill out involve the ProQuest publishing options and the IR publishing options. So PQ is ProQuest, IR is Institutional Repository. And these are really the key. This is why we're doing this online submission at all. First, let me show you what ProQuest publishing actually means. And this is important for you to understand at the outset. If you were to go to Bluford Library's website and click on the D databases, you would come up with the dissertations and theses full text. Click on that. This brings you to ProQuest's repository of full text dissertations and theses. And so once you complete your work, once it goes through this entire submission process, it too will be published to this database. And the key is that this is an international database. This is a database that holds documents from all universities that use this system around the world. So you could search by university, you could type in university name, you could type in a person's name, and it would find their document if it's in the system. You can also browse. I'm going to skip over that, but you could browse by location, and you can choose a specific school. You could also do an advanced search to find a specific school. And I'm going to skip to that because I'm going to show you the ones that are specifically from our institution, and it will look something like this. Right now we have 194 documents already published, several more pending. If you scroll through, you'll see it gives the title of the document, gives the name of the individual, the institution, and it gives the year of publication. Now it's going to say dissertations publishing. That will be the case even if you're doing a thesis. It'll come up under UMI dissertations publishing. So it doesn't distinguish between the two. I'll come back to a couple of these points as we go along, but it's worth noting that someone would have access to your citation and abstract. So it gives your abstract formatted however you choose, and I'll show you what that looks like. They'll also have indexing information, including subjects, classifications, keywords that you've chosen. It'll tell the number of pages. It'll tell your committee members, your main advisor, these sorts of details. So these are all the kind of things that someone's going to be able to see. Additionally, it will publish the full text of the documents. You can actually look at the full text of documents submitted by other students at our institution or at other institutions. And again, that's the big advantage of this system. So again, here's our kind of proceedings through the submission process. Going back, we were looking at the instructions. Let's continue. And the first thing we have to address is how we want ProQuest to publish the document. For virtually all students, traditional publishing would be the logical choice. You can do this other option, which is called open access publishing. It costs you an additional $95 out of pocket. The one advantage of it is that it's searchable even through Google. So in other words, you wouldn't even need access to a library database like this to get to this ProQuest database. They would be publishing it on their own servers, and you could find it even through Google directly. For most students, that's not really necessary. Anyone who's going to be looking at it should have some sort of an institutional affiliation, and they will be able to look your document up through the main ProQuest database. So again, it's your choice. You can certainly read about the details. They have a detailed publishing guide that explains the differences, but for most students, traditional publishing would be the best choice. Now again, this is something you can choose either one, but whether you want search engines to discover your work through ProQuest, and you can learn more about what exactly that means. Again, it wouldn't mean that they have instant access, but they could at least see the listing for it, and then they could go directly to the document if they had institutional access to that database. One other point that comes up in some cases is the option of putting a delay or an embargo on the release of your work. There are several reasons that this could be the case. So let's say there's some sort of publishing issue with another publisher. There's a patent that's in play, sensitive material, and you need to wait until a certain date has passed. Whatever the case may be, there are certain reasons that this might be applicable. You can delay release to ProQuest for 6 months or 1 year. You can also give more details here if you need longer than 1 year, and you have to have a particular reason for delaying longer than 1 year. That's not just something that you can do by default. Many students will choose not to do this, and you'll just push yes, it can be available as soon as it's published. Some students will choose this option, and you can always speak to your advisors. You can certainly speak to us at the graduate school for more advice if you need it. But you can read more information here from ProQuest on this issue. If you did choose an embargo, so let's say you were to choose that you want to delay the publication for 1 year, once your document is sent to ProQuest, it will still appear, and here's an example of this. It appears, but the full text is not yet available. So the title, the author's name, the institution, the year, and the citation and abstract will be published, even if you choose an embargo. The thing that will not be published instantly is the full text document itself. So for this individual, those other things are available, but the text is not yet available, and you can see the difference in the appearance. So that's what it would actually look like in practice once it's sent to ProQuest for publishing. So again, many students will decide there's no reason to delay. If you want to delay, you do have that option. And speak to your advisors if there's any copyright issues in play. The next piece is the ProQuest UMI agreement based on what you chose in the previous option. So here I had chosen traditional. It gives you all these details, etc., etc. There's even royalties. This rarely comes into play, but it's worth knowing all about that. Okay, so let's say accept this. Great. I would recommend you read through it more carefully. The next thing that comes up is not ProQuest publishing, but it's institutional repository publishing. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Well, basically it means Bluford Library has its own internal repository of published theses and dissertations. So if we go back to the Bluford Library website, if you go onto the link Digital Initiatives, this is what will come up. And there are a whole variety of digital initiatives, but towards the bottom you'll see theses and dissertations. And here we have since 2010, it's a much larger pool of documents. These electronic copies have been saved and uploaded. If the internet will comply, we can take a look at it, but it's sort of an institution-based alternative or supplement to the ETD system. Now again, someone at another institution may well find your document through the ProQuest database, but it is worth noting that Bluford Library also separately catalogs these items electronically. And so it basically is asking the same thing. Do you want it available immediately? Do you want it to be published there immediately? Or do you have, again, a reason that you want to delay the publication? And for most students, I would say if you've chosen a delay for ProQuest, it would probably make sense to have the same delay for the institutional repository. Again, that's up to you. It's presumably less widely accessed than the ProQuest database, but it's probably worth keeping the same parameters as what you chose for ProQuest. And again, you can explain why if there's a reason to delay the publication. It looks like that website's not going to pull up. Okay, so let's say in this case, I'm not going to delay. And if you save and continue, it's going to go to the university agreement. And so, yeah, there's really not much on this page. It's just asking you to check the format. So there's really nothing you have to do here. You just say, yes, I agree, save. Okay, now the next thing that you're going to come to is your contact information. So I started typing in some mine. This is just my office information. Put your information as required. Put your address. It may be the same as your current address. Again, put in whatever you need to put in. You'd finish that. You'd click OK. I'm going to skip over it, so it's not going to check, but you get the idea. Now the next key piece that comes up is the actual dissertation thesis details and the document itself. So here, under dissertation thesis details, you're going to put the title, the year it's going to be completed, the year your degree is awarded, what degree, what department, and these should match our institution's offerings. Your advisor, if you have co-advisors, you could put them both here, and your committee members, your main committee members on your thesis or dissertation committee. And here's where you can choose the subject categories, and there's a huge range of them. They may not be exactly the same as your department. In other words, maybe the subject is something that's a specialization within your field of study. And so you can pick your primary subject category. You can pick 2 additional ones if you want refinement. And that would allow somebody who's searching the database by categories or keywords to find your document listed amongst others in that category. You can also type in keywords that you've chosen if you see fit. That's not required, but you certainly can do that if you feel like it would help people find your work. The other key thing on this page, and again, this is just called dissertation thesis details, the other key item here is the abstract. You need to copy and paste your abstract into this space. Now this page seems pretty straightforward, but just keep in mind that however you type your title here and however you type your abstract here will determine how they appear here. So in other words, your capitalization will match whatever you put here. This is where the ProQuest is going to get the official title and information. So please do double check those details. For the abstract, you're going to notice if you copy and paste something that's using some sort of special font or format, it may not come out right when you first copy and paste it. The reason is that this is actually a box in which you need to use HTML codes. So you might have to use HTML codes. This should give you some of the details on that. If you need bold, italics, underlining, superscript, subscript, you have to use these specific HTML formatting codes. Some other ones I believe are also usable. One of the problems, or one of the tricky things, is it's sometimes hard for you to see it. You have to first do it here, and once you submit, it should become apparent. But it's hard to know if you've never worked with HTML what it's going to look like. So do your best to follow those guidelines. If there's a problem, we'll help you correct it before it's finally published. but that's why the abstract is important. So if you want to do something like differentiate the paragraphs, you would want to make sure you also put a space between the paragraphs. Again, the appearance here is exactly how it would appear once it's published, with those HTML codes added. So let's save and continue. Okay, well, I can't do that because I skipped some things. That's fine. The next page is another crucial one. It's the submission of the PDF document itself. So again, if you were to look back at the submission, you would already have submitted by this point your advisor approved copy as a PDF, and you can read more about that. This is going to be the exact same PDF document that you'd submitted there. There are a lot of kind of details. It talks about embedded fonts. Often these things are done automatically with major PDF creation programs, or if you, for instance, if you're using Microsoft Word and you save it as a PDF, it may do some of these things automatically. You may have to go back and make some changes. In most cases, there's not a major problem. But if you need help, you can read here for more details about embedding fonts. There's other information about different versions of Microsoft Word. Additionally, if you need PDF conversion, so if you have a Word document and you want to convert it, you can also use ProQuest's own converter. But again, usually by this point, you should have a PDF that's already meeting these criteria. Again, if there's a problem, we can help you fix that. So you shouldn't be worried, but try to do these things as much as possible in advance. You scroll down here, you browse, you find a PDF document. So here's a sample document, and it'll upload it. And then if you wait a minute, it'll refresh the page, and it just refreshed the page. Now this file was uploaded, and you can see the PDF that was uploaded, so you can check that it's the correct one right away. Most students will not have additional copyright documents, but if you did, you could submit those as well. Again, that usually doesn't apply. You would save and continue. The next two things are optional. If you have supplemental files, again, this is fairly uncommon, but if it were the case, you could add them there. In other words, not part of the main document, but some supplementary materials that need to be with the document in some sense. You can also leave notes to us, the administrators. But that first two sets covers publishing, and it covers the thesis or dissertation details and materials. Now the last piece is a couple of other options you have, and these are both options that will cost money, but they're things that may be advantageous to you. So I'm going to show you those briefly. So first, you can choose to register U.S. copyright. Now if you've been working with the template or the handbook, you will know that there is already a copyright page built in to the thesis or dissertation. It's the third page of the document. All of them must have that copyright page. And the one thing I'll point out is that simply by virtue of having that page and publishing the document, your work does carry a basic copyright privilege. So registering for a copyright, which is what they're offering here, is a further step. And specifically, the advantage of doing this, I believe, is if you were in some sort of legal dispute over copyright, it would be easier for you to proceed. It would be more cost efficient. In other words, some of the legal fees would be covered if you had already registered your copyright. That is not to say that you have to do this for your work to be copyrighted. Again, it has a basic copyright protection by default by virtue of being published, but some students may decide that if it's really important material, they want to register the copyright. And again, you're registering the copyright on the document itself, not on patents that may be involved, but on the document itself as a published piece of writing and scholarship. You can read a lot more about that. They give you a great deal of information. I believe, yeah, right here, if you click Learn More, it would show you their entire guide to publishing. And so again, it's up to you, but most students may decide they do not need to register formally for a copyright. And actually, I'll also point out, you can do this on your own. You can actually register for a copyright for your work, I think for a little bit cheaper than what ProQuest is charging, because ProQuest charges $55. I think the default fee last I'd seen was $35, but then you'd have to fill out the paperwork yourself, so that could be a bit of a hassle. So again, read the details, see if this is something that's important to you. Note that once you hit the submit button down here, once you've filled everything out on these pages, Most of this stuff can be revised. These two pieces cannot. So that's really important. So again, if you want copyright, I believe you have to do it right at the outset. Or if you want, in other words, if you want ProQuest to register your copyright, you have to do it right at the outset, the first time you submit. Okay, the other thing you can do is you can order bound copies through UMyProQuest. You may find this to be a very nice option. The bound copies are quite lovely. They have, if you get the hardcover, you get the hardcover binding. It'll have your title, your name, the year, I believe. I haven't seen many of these in person, but they are automatically in color, and they're double-sided, so it's a very nice appearance. So if you want a copy of your work, if you want to see this beautiful copy you can put on your shelf or you can share with others, this might be something you'd like to do. It will cost you, however. You can choose hardcover. This is the generic one. This is, in other words, full size, because the full size of the sheet of paper. That's what they're showing up here, these taller ones. You can get a smaller copy, and you can get them for a little cheaper. You choose how many copies you want of whichever type. You can even get soft cover for a little cheaper, but frankly, I don't think it's that much cheaper. So if you're going to get one, I would think you might as well get the nicer bound copy, hardcover. This is an agreement, as are all these other payment options, not with the graduate school at NCA&T, but these are agreements with ProQuest. So in other words, you're giving them your payment information, you're paying them. We don't have any control over the bound copies once you make a decision here. So if you need to follow up, you would have to call them, or you'd have to send an email to follow up on your order. Two quick points I will make, because these can be a little disorienting to students who weren't prepared for this. The first thing is, if you order a bound copy, it's not going to come immediately. It's going to take a little while, because it's going to come only 8 to 12 weeks after they receive the document. And just to be clear, they don't actually receive the document until after you've graduated. So in other words, graduation hits. Usually it'll be another couple of months before ProQuest receives the document. And then from that point, it's an additional 2 to 3 months before they would be shipping your published document. So just keep that in mind. Just don't expect it to come, a week after you graduate or something like that. It will come a considerable time later. But the advantage is you can get this done in advance. You'll get these beautiful copies coming to you that may well be worth your while. It is certainly possible in most cities to get documents bound by a local bindery. You'd have to look into that. They would have different prices and different kind of policies, but you may be interested in that option instead. In other words, you would bring them the document and you'd ask them to do this or that to publish it, or to print it, rather. The other small detail I wanted to mention, it's not really specified here, but the bound copy does not include the signature page with signatures. And for some students, that's an issue, or something that you find unpleasant or whatever, or less than satisfactory. But do keep that in mind. The signatures themselves are collected and given to the graduate school for keeping, but they're not going to appear in the published document. They're not going to appear in the online version. They're not going to appear in the bound copies you would order, because in other words, ProQuest never gets that signature page. That's not part of the document that they receive. And it's partly for privacy reasons to not distribute all your professors' signatures, and it's partly a logistical matter that the graduate school here is the institution that needs the signature page. ProQuest doesn't need it. It's not the thing that they require. So keep that in mind. So again, order copies if you like. You may decide to register for copyright, but be aware that both of these options must be done the first time through. Because you're going to actually, if you choose these options, you have to pay with a credit card right then, and you can't change those options directly thereafter. I'll show you what I mean by change them directly. You could, however, call UMI or email them if you need to update something. It's not the end of the world, but my point is, if you want to order copies, you should decide that up front. Okay, now it's not going to let me, but let's pretend I was able to submit. So I've filled everything out just the way I want to. I would now submit it. When you click submit, what happens is it comes to the graduate school. In other words, we can see the other side, the flip side of this process. So every time a student submits a document, it appears on our end. We can then read through it. We can monitor it. And when you submit your document, the PDF, all the options you've chosen will come through to us. Yeah, it's not going to let me submit it because there are a few things I didn't complete, but you get the idea. If you had checked off all these boxes, it would be able to submit. Once the graduate school receives the submission, and this is another key point building from the deadlines. Let's say the deadline, for instance, is October 31st. On the October 31st deadline, you must have submitted these hard documents by the end of that business day, because these things have to be submitted in the graduate school office. Then you're going to go ahead and create your account after doing that. Now, we usually ask that if at all possible, you submit your online document within 24 hours of bringing in these documents so that you can get right into our kind of queue of students for review. But do keep in mind that we do not review your document until we receive the electronic copy. So in a sense, these 4 steps are preparing you or kind of clearing you for the actual electronic submission. And the electronic submission ends up being the key to the whole thing. So until you fill these things all out and click submit, we cannot review your document. And that's an important point worth reiterating. Once we do get your document and we begin to review it, we will send you some electronic correspondence regarding any feedback required. Usually you'll get an email. It'll say something like minor changes required for your thesis or your dissertation. In some cases, major changes, but hopefully minor in most cases. Most students will have some kind of revision to do. Usually there'll be small formatting issues or very minor grammatical issues that come up in some key sections. You'll receive those comments as an email. It'll ask you to go back into your account and revise the document. So again, you're not going to see exactly what it looks like here, but there's an example on this how to submit electronic thesis dissertation PDF. And if you go through this, this is showing you basically exactly the things I've been showing you. So it shows you slide by slide what it looks like. Go to that page, create your account, fill in your information, choose your publishing options, etc. So this shows you what all those steps look like. And when you go back in, you're going to see more or less the same thing. In other words, you're going to see that you've already submitted these steps. These steps will be checked, but you can revise most of those steps. So you can revise, for instance, the publishing options if you need to. You can revise the PDF itself, which is crucial. You can revise the details if you need to change something about the abstract or about the description. You can change those details even after you push submit. So again, when you push submit, it's coming to us at the graduate school, and it's not until we, as the graduate school, finalize it that it's actually delivered to ProQuest. So if that makes sense, the key is we're looking over it before it's finalized and going out for publication. So when you click submit, it does not mean you're submitting it directly to ProQuest. You're submitting it to us for review. Now, one other point I wanted to make, I forgot to say this before, but with the ordered copies, the other thing that's important is even though you have to choose this option and you have to pay the price up front, you will only receive bound copies of the final version of your document. So in other words, even if we ask you to make revisions, they're not going to print the first version. They're going to print whatever we say is the final version of that PDF. So don't be nervous about that, because some students hold off on ordering copies, and then it turns out it's actually a pain because you have to either call them or submit a form or something to order copies later. So if you do want to order copies, it's probably easiest to do it the first run through. Just keep in mind that it will only be the final version of the PDF, whatever form that takes, that is published and that is printed.